Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Dawn Zoldi, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and your host for the Dawn of Drones podcast on DroneLife TV. We are so happy to be with you today. We're about a week out from AUV Exponential, and we are talking with thought leaders all month long. And we kicked it off with our month sponsor, Don Bershoff, CEO of TrueWeather. Last week we had Dr. Jack Elston, CEO of Colorado-based Blacksmith Technologies. And if you missed any of these, don't forget you can watch all of them on demand on DroneLife TV. If you haven't subscribed yet, absolutely go ahead and do that. You'll get notified every time we go live. So today we are so fortunate to have with us Elad Shalev from Skywatch AI. They are the leaders in drone insurance. And you're probably thinking, drone insurance, how's that a leadership issue? Well, it is, because if you're concerned about risk management, if you want your business to be successful, this is one of those things that you have to have aligned with your business plan. So, Elad, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us again. Happy to be
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Well, Elad says again, because for those that have been following me, about a year ago, I had Yuval Caspi from Skywatch on my legacy podcast called Drones at Dawn. That was affiliated with with Inner Drone, and I believe Yuval was one of my first guests ever in February of 2021. And in fact, Mike has that link, so I know he's going to drop that in the chat. Speaking of chat, everybody, you're out there. Let us know who you are, where you're from. Ask Elad your questions, because I know you're going to have some. This is such an important topic. And of course, always give us positive encouragement. We love that. So thanks, Mike, for dropping that. Appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about you, Elad. By the way, everybody, fun fact: Elad is also an attorney. He's coming to us live from Israel, and we talked a lot about this on Clubhouse. If you missed that, you can also listen to that replay. It was really fun. But you're a licensed attorney in Israel, and you have a passion for drones, and somehow that all collided, and you came to work for Skywatch AI. Tell us about that journey and your background.
So you said it very well. Since I was a young kid, I thought drones are the coolest thing on earth. And growing up and becoming a lawyer, it actually connected perfectly with Skywatch. Today I work as a marketing manager, and I play with drones all day long, and I get to also play with law. That can be really cool sometimes. So yeah, for me it's a dream come true, and I feel very lucky to be where I am.
You know, it's funny because people even ask me a lot, like, what are you doing now in your company? And I tell them what I do, the podcast, the writings. And they're like, but wait a minute, you're a lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, guess what? I've been advocating my whole life. Like, that's what I do. I love writing, I love speaking. So it makes sense to me that you're a marketing manager for Skywatch, because I completely relate to that. And the training that we get, I think, and the critical thinking skills really lends itself to being very effective in the marketing sector. So, but that's really, and you and I both have this passion for drones and drone policy and drone law, and obviously working with Skywatch. So, most people know what Skywatch is and does, but let's kind of talk about the origin story, because Skywatch did not start out as an insurance company, right? So tell us what it really was about initially and how it's evolved over time.
Right. So Skywatch was established actually back in 2018. And as you said correctly, we're not an insurance company at all. We were established as a startup company, a high-tech company here in Israel. And we basically tried to make drone insurance something that makes sense. Back in the days when people wanted to insure their drones, and when traditional insurance companies tried to offer insurance, it was sometimes so expensive that you could pay more for the drone insurance than you paid for the drone itself. So pretty ridiculous.
Yes.
What we did is basically use technology, analytics, telematics to get much better assessment of the risks behind drone operations, like to get actual data. And thanks to that data, we were able to offer much more reasonable rates. and to make drone insurance something that it's much more customized also. Since we were able to monitor the different factors of risk, we could actually break the policy and let people choose what they want, not what the insurance company wants them to do. So they can choose whatever they want, the amount of liability, do they want hull coverage, medical expenses, they can choose and build something that is customized to their needs in few clicks on our website. Obviously, everything is digital, and I mean, we are a startup company. You can do it online through any device. And the bottom line is that we made drone insurance something that is very simple. You can just, any drone operator, wherever you are, you can just, without worrying too much about insurance, 2-3 minutes on our website, and you're good to go. You can fly with peace of mind, and that's what it was all about.
Well, I love that. I mean, AI is in the title of your company, right? And we see AI being so effectively used throughout drone operations for so many different purposes, like Jack Elston was talking about last week and how it assists him with visual, kind of detection for beyond visual line of sight. I love how you all took this AI and grabbed the data, which we all know is king in this industry, and used it to understand this industry and the risks. So that's a great segue, Elad. Let's talk a little bit about the industry. And really, just kind of from where you sit, let's not talk about the accidents and incidents yet. Let's talk about the industry in general and some trends, let's just say over the last year up till now, that you're seeing from your perch.
So there's a lot of trends, and actually we gathered some inside data that we'll share with you later on. But one interesting trend that I can mention very quickly is actually fleets. We see more and more commercial use of fleets. They're growing in number, they're growing in quality, so better drones. And it's actually, I mean, I see it as a very interesting trend actually that might challenge not only the drone industry but actually a lot of industries. And it is, I mean, especially interesting from the insurance perspective. So that's an interesting trend to note, definitely.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because what we're seeing in the industry, I think globally, are regulations trying to catch up. We know they're always a little behind. I just mentioned beyond visual line of sight. That's a big one to many operations. And also this, I will call it, the drone in the box solutions that we're seeing more and more being employed for a wide variety of use cases, whether it's critical infrastructure inspection or, precision agriculture. So this idea that companies, businesses, organizations are moving more towards a fleet concept as opposed to having one drone, 3 drones, and one pilot makes a lot of sense to me. When we talked in Clubhouse, we also talked about kind of this related trend of more sophisticated equipment and technology. Right. Tell us about that a little bit more.
Right. So what we're seeing, and that's actually pretty shocking, since 2018, the average cost of a drone insured in Skywatch got up by 30%, more than 30%. Used to be almost $300. Today, it's more than $400. So it's a huge increase. And it tells us a lot about the industry, about the drones out there, and mainly about the operators, the pilots, that are actually using much more sophisticated equipment. They invest more in what they do. They buy better drones that can do much more complicated operations. So that's a very interesting thing to see. And a trend that I mean can tell us a lot about the industry and how it's actually maturing during time.
Yeah, and I would assume a lot that, with the, as you said, more sophisticated equipment, we're seeing more, kind of advanced operations, that right. There would be a related sophistication of some of the pilots that are out there in terms of their experience and, again, the type of things that they're doing with these more expensive drones. It seems to me, just from where I've been sitting and, kind of watching as well, just like you, that drone delivery is one of those use cases that really, no pun intended, took off, especially during COVID, right? During this pandemic we've all been kind of living under in the last couple of years. the idea of drones as the ultimate social distancer. So are you seeing that as well, Elad? This idea that the pilots themselves are getting a little bit more sophisticated in maybe even how they're interacting with you and your company?
Yeah, 100%. We see it all the time. Going back to our insight data, we see that like the way that people build their policies, they are doing much more complicated operations. Not just, as I mentioned earlier, involving more drones, but actually doing stuff that require higher liability. Sometimes they do things worldwide, not only in the U.S. We in many cases need to tailor policies for the needs of a certain company or a certain customer that is doing stuff that a few years ago, you couldn't imagine. I remember seeing a post in one of those drone community forums of how you used to film Hollywood movies like a few years ago
Oh yeah.
with a guy sitting on a helicopter and like this super complicated
Oh,
operation.
right.
We do it today with drones.
You
Very
know, I
sophisticated.
have to say, Elad, you are so right. And I am such a nerd that it almost ruins every movie I go to now because I'll be watching and I'm like, oh, that's totally a drone shot. And I'll be hitting my husband like that one was a drone shot. And but no, you're absolutely right. So many additional use cases. What I want to talk about a little bit, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but I think it's worth repeating, even though we talked about it with Yuval last year. And by the way, it's in an article I wrote for DroneLife after that podcast. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind dropping that article link to the previous DroneLife piece, let's kind of give a quick overview of the different kinds of insurance because you're alluding to it. But for those that really aren't familiar, this idea of whole insurance versus general liability and some of the other things that you're seeing more and more as a need for folks in this industry.
Okay, so I'll make it simple because that's how we like it at Skywatch. The most important thing is the two basic kinds of insurance. The most basic one is liability, actually. So let's imagine a drone operator, something happens, his drone is, I don't know, creating some kind of damage, okay? Liability will cover the cost of the person that got the damage. So if my drone flew into a car,
Yeah.
liability will pay for the car owner, okay?
Yeah,
For the
like the injured party, if you will.
Exactly, exactly. And at that point, you can choose how much liability do you want, to which extent. The more complicated your operations are, as the risk factor is higher, you would want higher liability, obviously.
Well,
Um,
and a lot of oftentimes a client or a customer will drive that amount that people have to buy because they'll put it in the contract, right? They'll say, "Oh, you're going to do this for us. Well, then we want to see proof of insurance at this amount, general liability, with us, customer as an additional insured."
Correct, correct, and that's a very important point. It's very important when you're leading an operation for a customer to check that you actually have the right liability that they ask you for in the contract. Many companies we didn't talk about it yet, but it's not yet an obligation by law to have drone insurance. But employers do require you to do insurance, obviously, and in many cases they also ask you for a certain amount of liability.
Yeah.
So that's the most basic insurance that you have to have, and that's the basic part. The second one and the most common one is hull coverage, or I'll say covering yourself. So going back to the example, something happened to the drone, damage happened to my own drone or my own equipment, hull
Right.
coverage will cover myself. It will cover me also in cases of theft or other incidents that might happen that can, obviously cause me losing a lot of money.
Yeah,
So that's
if I
yeah,
recall correctly, someone in Clubhouse did specifically answer that question, ask that question about theft, because sadly we are seeing more of this. Where a drone pilot will have their equipment, they'll run into somewhere to grab food or something, and the car's broken into. So, I've seen that on some of those Facebook pages where people are complaining, and now there's even people that have, I think Drone Sec created a place to track. You can report those thefts, and all the information out about your drone, and then they alert, I think, law enforcement agencies that, hey, this is stolen. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, I don't mean to digress. But
Yeah,
so
but
you're
it
talking
is
about
very important. It is very important because it is a very common issue. Going back to our inside data, it's one of the more common claims that people have. I went somewhere and someone stole my drone from my car. So what you feel by the comments you're reading is actually backed by data. It is very common, and that's part of the reason it's very important to have hull coverage for your drone.
so the general liability, hull coverage seem to be the two most
Yeah.
common. But
Right.
I think it's a great segue, Elad, to talk now a little bit about the trends then you're seeing, because I think that informs, what people actually need or should be thinking about. So tell us about some of that insight trend data that you're seeing from Skywatch.
Yeah. So one interesting point regarding actually hull coverage is that we're seeing it increasing every year. More and more people are doing hull coverage. In fact, 34% of the market of drone operators that do drone insurance choose to cover themselves. And why is it that interesting? As we mentioned earlier, the companies, the employer, require people to do liability, but they don't require them to cover themselves. The fact that more than a third of pilots choose to cover themselves teaches a lot about again, the industry. People
Yep.
care about their equipment more than ever. People understand the importance of insurance more than ever, and the industry as a whole is more professional. People, it's not a hobby. Okay, that's I think the bottom line here. It's not a hobby anymore. It's not just playing with drones. It's a profession, and you need to cover yourself. And it can tell us a lot about the industry. Actually, it's a very interesting trend. But by the way, as part of hull coverage, you don't have to do that. But a lot of people, almost 10% of customers, choose to insure their extra equipment, so their camera.
Like, yeah, I was going to say, so like like if they, I mean, I know from what I hear, LiDAR sensors, as an example, are super expensive.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so I imagine people are insuring things like that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And there's more and more stuff every year. Since the industry is growing, there's new equipment all the time. And yeah, people definitely invest in it and they want to be covered. So that's definitely very interesting. And I guess the second one is going back to what we said earlier. Operations are becoming more complicated. People
Right.
ask for stuff they didn't ask for in the past. I think one interesting interesting thing to note is privacy. Something people don't always think about when it comes to
Ah,
drones.
so
That,
how do
yeah.
you ensure your operations for privacy purposes?
So it's not always in your policy, but you can add it to your policy actually if you want so. And talking about deliveries and flying in urban areas, sometimes your drone can take pictures that it's not supposed to. And people today apparently are very much aware of their privacy, and they can get to you and they can actually sue you. So it's not a very common thing, but it definitely something that happens. And obviously, the more you fly around people, it happens more. So that's an interesting trend to
You
note.
know, I didn't know, we didn't talk about that in Clubhouse, and I didn't know that. I never really thought about that a lot. And actually, I'm giving a talk next Tuesday about privacy, data privacy, and considerations for businesses. So I'm telling you now, I'm adding that to this talk. I think it's at 4:30 Tuesday afternoon at AUVSI Exponential, and that's the
Cool.
topic I'm speaking to. So I'm adding that to my slides. So you're getting a shout out at AUVSI there
Cool.
too.
Cool. Great.
Really, it makes a lot of sense though. I never thought about it, but there, I don't know about globally. Well, okay, I'll take it back. Globally, the European Union, I think, is pretty aggressive when it comes to privacy with the GDPR. And then now they even have an AI regulation, that relates to biometrics and all. And in the United States, there's a number of states that also, have the Privacy Protection Acts, Consumer Privacy Protection Acts, that are very broad and could encompass UAS operations. So makes a
Yep.
lot of sense to me. Okay, so that was number two. Do you have a number three on trends that you're seeing from your data?
Another trend that one goes back to basics, so back to liability.
Yeah.
Employers ask people for much higher, pilots, drone operators for much higher liability than they used to.
Yeah.
Even though I'll explain how we see that, even though our prices didn't change since we started,
Right.
we see an increase in the average pay that people that drone operators choose to pay per month for insurance. So that the amount they
Interesting.
invest in their insurance, it used to be around $30. It's around $100 today. And again, it's the same price. The only reason that it's higher is because people are actually choosing a wider coverage. So they're
Right.
not doing the basic minimal coverage. They're doing much more. And in
Yeah.
many cases, it's because the employer is asking them so. He knows that what he's asked, I mean, the operation is very complicated. The risk is very high. Maybe there's a
Right.
couple of drugs involved. So he needs higher liability. And that's part of the reason we're seeing this increase. So again, very interesting. And again, showing the responsibility that we as an industry are developing and getting better at.
No, that's great stuff. By the way, I want to mention real quick, Barry Alexander is out there saying he's listening in and said hello. So, hey Barry, thanks for
Hey,
listening in.
Mary.
Appreciate you. If you have any questions, Barry, or anybody else out there, drop them in the chat. We'll absolutely get to them because, Elad fielded a number of questions on Clubhouse. They're really excellent questions. And we'd love to actually shape this podcast to be what you all want to hear about. I certainly have questions lined up for Elad, but it's all about you and what you guys want to know. So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about some of the trends you're seeing in terms of people requesting coverage.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the safety trends that you're seeing as well. I know that one of the things we did talk about last week, maybe not surprisingly, is that a number of accidents and incidents are actually caused by weather.
Right.
And so this is my chance to shout out True Weather Solutions again, our month sponsor, doing amazing things, helping kind of fill that data desert, that gap for low altitude microclimate information and data through an ecosystem of sensors and a network. So again, check out Don's podcast. We talked a lot about that. But it makes sense that you're seeing a lot of claims about weather, but like what kinds of things are you seeing a lot?
So weather is a big thing for sure. I mean, as I mentioned in your clubhouse, wind is a strong factor, and too many people just don't check the weather before they go out for their operation. So it's very important to bear in mind if your drone is actually capable to deal with the weather, if the operation that you're actually that you want to perform is something that you can do in this weather condition.
Right.
There's a lot of also classic stuff like flying into a tree. Like yeah, I mean it's funny, but like it things that happen and it's actually pretty common. We also mentioned like I mean just something funny to note on our clubhouse that birds are a big issue, and I mean we see it more than you would expect. Eagles, taking away your drone, all kind of stuff that people don't always bear in mind,
Right.
and it happens. It happens quite a lot. So that's another thing that I think is interesting to note. And one last thing that maybe people can avoid, I'll say, more than the things that sometime a lightning hits you, right?
Right.
But something that you can actually do in order to avoid accidents is to check the reception. We know there's areas where the reception is not good enough, and usually, in many cases, many claims, in the end of the day, we discovered that that was the reasoning behind the accident. And it's very easy to check it from advance and make sure everything is working well. You can check in forums. There's actually areas that are more risky than others. So if I can give you one tip, one safety trend is to check in advance, and it can definitely help you avoid these accidents.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely areas that are GPS denied, and if your aircraft relies on that and you don't have something like, former podcast guest, in fact, another company from Israel, Elsite, and their Halo solution, if you don't have something like that on board that's going to sniff out connectivity and make sure you have continuous connection, and you're in an area where this could be shaky, why go there? I mean, here's the other thing I was thinking as you were talking a lot was, I don't know that especially a professional pilot that takes the time to buy insurance is not checking the weather. My guess is they're not getting the right data to make informed and correct decisions,
Right.
so again, back to true weather, but they're going to have a weather summit, I think, on Monday, also at AEVSI, and Don and a bunch of folks, actually Jack Elston will be there. Of course, it conflicts with my event, which we'll talk about later, but no, I mean, weather is so important. And when you think about it, if you're taking the time to buy insurance, these are things, your connectivity, the weather, those all absolutely have to be on the checklist. You have to have the right, apps, the right applications, the right technology on board to make sure you're doing this right. So, yeah, that
100%.
yeah,
We
absolutely.
also have our own app, by the way, Skywatch app, that can actually help you and give you feedback on the way you use your drone. And so, I mean, you can obviously get your insurance through the app, but that's like another nice extra to have. You can get info about the weather. So, I mean, every app is good as long as you know what to look for, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good source.
Yeah.
But that's another option.
So that's an interesting, going off script here a lot, so bear with me. I don't know the answer to it because we didn't talk about it in advance, but
No worries.
do you give like credit or special points for people that work with you, almost like some of the traditional insurance companies do with cars, where if you're, a value driver or something, you haven't gotten in accidents, you don't have any tickets within a certain amount of time, they'll shave a couple of dollars off of your premium or your the cost of that insurance for you. Do you have something like that?
We have, and we have even something more sophisticated than that. I mean, we are a startup company. We actually have scores. We give scores to pilots, and you can actually get discounts on your insurance if you're a good pilot. So it's not just for being a loyal customer. We also have that, and obviously, if someone is doing like annual insurance and wanna move to like do another year, he'll get discount for sure. But we're doing more than that. We're giving you discounts because you're a safe pilot. So that's a nice extra that again you can do with our app.
So it's almost like you're giving them a credit score, but you're giving them a drone pilot score,
Yeah.
and then giving, that's really cool,
Yeah.
that you do that. And it's, well, there's a lot of good reasons to do it, right? Number one, it's incentive for people to remain safe because there's now a double financial incentive,
Right.
right? The rates aren't going to go up. In fact, they'll go down,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, no, that's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Were there any other, let me ask you this, since we're talking about some of these trends, some of these accidents, and some of them are funny, but really at the end of the day, it's not, if someone gets injured or, of course, property is damaged, even if it's your own drone. Um, are there any troubling trends, any trends that you would say, huh, this is concerning? And, as someone watching the industry, like sounding the alarm, like, hey, if you're out there flying, this is something, besides the weather and comms, that you guys need to be thinking about.
Yeah. So I'll say something that I'm not. I mean, I'm seeing all the time and I'm hearing all the time, and it happens especially with new, actually, drone specialists, drone operators. The problem with insurance, and maybe I mean, as a lawyer, you'll feel it from other aspects also of law. The aha moment is only after things happen. Okay, so
Oh,
people don't really understand what can happen, or they don't feel the importance of doing insurance until something happens, and it
mm.
happens a lot, especially with people that are new to the industry and they're just starting, and again, they're thinking about drones as a hobby, maybe something that they're doing a bit more professionally, but they're not thinking about insurance. And then things happen. So
Oh,
that's
so when you say this, like, okay, I've just crashed my drone, aha, I probably need insurance, and then they call you after the fact?
that will be too late. But then for next time, he'll do insurance, and he'll be. I mean, these are the best customers. We don't need to explain a lot. They call us and sometimes they just say, you know, this and this happened. I just want to be completely covered. Like that's what I want. I don't want it to happen again. And that's a challenge with insurance. That's part of the reason we in Skywatch put education, like educating the industry, as one of our main goals. I mean, we see ourselves as part of the industry, part of the community, and we take it very seriously to educate people about the importance of insurance. We're doing webinars, we're doing all kind of events. We've been to a couple of big events recently. That's like one thing that is very important to make sure people understand the importance of insurance, even though it's still not something you're obligated by law, and especially with people that are just starting. You know, yeah, that's an important point.
So what are some of your educational platforms? You know, I assume your website is chock full of information. You mentioned some events. Like if someone is out there and they're like, where can we get educated more about you know, these issues, insurance, what I need to know, or even just how to plug in the Skywatch AI, where would you send them? What are some of the best resources you would send them to?
Okay, so in-house stuff, definitely check our website. We have, I mean, we're uploading blogs all the time about the industry in general, news and stuff, but definitely a lot of stuff about safety and insurance and how to be more professional in the end of the day. You can definitely subscribe to our newsletter, also on our website. You can check our events. I mean, if you'll follow us on social media, every once in a while, we'll upload an event. This, for example, I mean, that's an initiative, like being in this podcast. We see it as also part of it is educating and talking about insurance. So things like that are things that we will put on social media, and just follow us, and you'll see it. But if you want to do something tailored for you, for I mean, for your school, we worked with a bunch UAV Coach and Drone U and Pilot Institute, many schools like that basically teach people how to become drone operators. If you want to have a webinar with us for free, we're coming wherever people want to hear us. We'll be there, and we'll give you the information. You want to have a blog on your website, you want info to put on your website, just explaining about insurance and what you need and what you don't need as a drone operator. We're all for it. Talk to us, send us a message, and we'll be there for you. So yeah.
Well, you know, that's awesome that you're plugging into education, because I agree 100%. It's all about education. And I love that you do that for free for people. Fun fact, my book is finally coming out that I authored. It's with the Unmanned Safety Institute. And it's called Unmanned Aircraft Systems, Legal and Business Considerations, a Modern Primer for the Industry. And I'm going to do a book signing next Tuesday at 3 o'clock at AUVSI Exponential. But I mention this a lot because one of my last chapters, I talk about all of these business considerations, whether it's safety management systems, privacy policies, and I say you need insurance. You know, insurance is one of those things that, as you're thinking about your business plan, that needs to be a part of it. Speaking of which, John Reynolds is out there. He's asked an excellent question. He's a Part 107 pilot, works for a company that has its own drone insurance. And he's wondering, should he also carry his own individual drone insurance? And I'm guessing your answer is going to be the lawyer answer. It depends, because you might need some more facts. You might need some more facts from that one. But just based on what John has asked, what can you tell him?
Yeah, so it depends. But what we recommend in Skywatch is to make sure your name is in the policy. So if the company did a wider insurance and your name is in there, that's 100% okay. If your name is not there, that can be problematic in certain cases. So it is very important to check that. And also part of the reason it's complicated is the question, when are you working for the company and when are you doing other things? Right. So many drone operators don't do full time with one company, or they do stuff with the drone outside of work hours, and then you will need drone insurance for yourself, since you're doing something that is, I mean, it's not part of your job in this company. So that's another thing to note. But
Well,
that's just
just from my experience as an attorney working for the military for almost 30 years, there's this whole thing also called within the scope of your employment. And so, if for some reason you're actually on the job for that employer, but maybe you venture outside kind of the scope of what they want you to do in some manner, even if it's, say they say, well, look, this was an intentional act. We have a policy, you violated our policy by flying in this area or at this time. And as a result, you're out of scope. Therefore, we're not going to cover you with our insurance. I think that could leave people in a bind too. So, this idea of really, I agree with you 100% there too, Elad, is ask those tough questions of your employer, look to see their policies, see if your name is on it. If not, also see the scope and scale of that coverage, because it may not actually personally protect you, just depending on what the language is. So, always good to review it. And Elad, if John wanted more information, could he call you and say, here's what I learned, can you walk me through this? And then you or someone from your team could help him?
100%. We have top-rated customer support with great people in the States and in Israel. So you can always call us. We have chatbots on our website. We have emails. Basically, any way that is comfortable for you, you can talk to us, ask your questions. We'll answer as soon as possible and give you not the it depends answer, rather than the answer that is uniquely correct for you. So feel free, 100%.
Awesome. So, John, make sure you're calling them. And thanks for your question. It was really excellent. I'm sure other people have similar questions in their minds. So we talked a little bit about how drone pilots can mitigate some of the risks that are out there, right? Checking the weather with the right app for the right information, making sure their connectivity is good, thinking about insurance, checking with their employers, see if they're listed. How else, what other tips, let's say, would you recommend, Elad, for pilots to mitigate their risks?
I think that's, again, I'm going back to the lawyer mindset. Sorry for that, but it depends. It depends on the risk factor. It is very important before any operation to talk to the customer, understand exactly the needs, what he expects from you, and what you are actually capable of doing. In many cases, since drones are, it's very easy to do things on the spot, right? It's not a ship, it's a drone, and you can find yourself doing stuff that you didn't thought you'll be doing today. It is very important to make sure, again, that the insurance is correct to your own unique needs. Okay, the industry is so wide today. The difference between a drone that is being used for agriculture and a drone that is being used for just shooting a movie, for example, that's a completely different thing. So the things that you need to worry about are very different. But in the end of the day, most claims that we hear, most things that we see in our data, unfortunately, are stuff that you can actually, with common sense, avoid. So again, just be very organized, talk with the client, understand exactly what he's expecting of you, check your equipment before. Many claims that we get are technical stuff. Now, you're thinking, okay, that's a technical thing. That's because of the drone. That's because of the company. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's stuff that if you would look before and check your equipment, you could actually avoid the accident. So checking your equipment, checking your drone before the operation it sounds like something that is obvious, but it happens too many times. So just very straightforward. Make sure you're doing, as we said earlier, the checklist, checking reception, and so on will help you avoid accidents, definitely.
It seems like so obvious, but it's almost like your best defense is that you followed the regulations, right? In other words, Part 107 in the U.S. and the FAA's advisory circular, 107-2A has some great maintenance checklists in there, some other checklists. if you've got them printed out, they're in your binder, you're running through that before you do an operation, you physically have a list, you can check it off. I mean, look, I spent years in the United States Air Force. No maintainer, no pilot is going to hop in the plane and fly unless they have run that checklist and can show that they ran that checklist. So I think just doing that, it just makes a lot of sense. We have a great question here from Drone Diva Desi Eckstein is out there from California.
Yes.
She's big in women and drones, has her own
Oh, we
coffee
love women
connection
and drones.
Tuesday. Desi, yep. Everybody knows Desi. She says having the option to do an additional insured is great. What is the best way to print a copy? Because you talked a lot about, hey, I've got an app, we've got all these things that, it's very modern and technologically oriented. How can you print a copy?
So very simple. The second you finish, like clicking the OK for your policy, after the 2-3 minutes that it took you to customize the policy that you need, you'll basically get a policy to your email with your logo already and everything you need. That's it. You're good to go. So you can basically send it online. You can print it from any computer, but that's it. I mean, there's nothing else you need to do more than that. You're covered. And if the insurance starts that second, you're covered from that second. So very simple.
And her second question is, can I print a list of drone fleet insured?
Yes. Yes. If you have definitely. So what we recommend is if you have a fleet, talk to us. We'll create something for you, okay, uniquely to your needs. Because again, we didn't mention it now, but we talk about it in Clubhouse, I think, like imagining, John, the drone operator, right? Using his drone. So, I mean, there is a certain amount of risk using your drone, right? And the more time you're flying with your drone and the more complex your operations are, the risk is becoming higher and higher, right? Now, imagine many drones in the air, right? Let's take it a step forward. The risk factor doubling itself according to the number of drones in the air in the same time. So it's much more complicated than just a regular drone flying around. So talk to us. We'll tailor something for you. And yeah, you can definitely have multiple drones on the same policy and print it. Definitely.
And if there's a one takeaway I'd say from everything we've talked about so far a lot is that if you have a question, ask it. Don't assume that's what they're there for. You can call them. By the way, thank you everybody for asking these questions. They were really great, but it just shows that people do have questions. And so absolutely pick up the phone, get on your computer, do the chat, whatever it takes, but don't assume things and don't just operate in a vacuum when you can easily get these answers.
100%.
By the way, Morgan McCauley's out there saying loves the show. So thank you. And my buddy Matt Higa, Matt is with Pineapple. Oh God, is it Pineapple? It's not Pineapple Express. It's like Pineapple News. They do every year they do the women in aerospace and aviation, the watch on LinkedIn, the top women in aviation and aerospace. And I know that process is ongoing for this year. I was blessed to be on that list last year. So thanks, Matt, for coming in and watching from San Francisco. Appreciate you and all the things you're doing to help the industry, you, Desi, and everybody else out there. So thanks so much. We are, oh my gosh, Elad, we are at 1 minute here, which is insane because I could talk to you all day long and clearly the audience is engaged and really interested in what you have to say. So let's do this. Why don't we kind of summarize here or give you the floor for your 30-second elevator speech on what you really want them to kind of take away from this episode, and again, how they can plug into your efforts.
Okay, so the most important thing for us, Skywatch, is to be part of the community. We came from the community. We didn't talk about our founders, the founders of the company, but we love drones, and that's where we come from. And we want to be there for the drone community. So we're doing it in multiple ways, again, like this channel, and part of it is webinars, is content that we're creating, and we'll love to cooperate with you. If you want to have some educational information, if you want to have an article, if you want to have something interesting with our data, on your website. We're all for it to work with the community and contribute whenever we can. Feel free to talk to us. Again, our customer support, you can see on Google, is top rated, and we're always happy to answer any question for free and give you the consulting that you need. Skywatch, in the end of the day, is a tech company. It's not an insurance company. We're here to change how insurance works. By the way, not only in drones, also in other industries, we're trying to make it something that's much more reasonable, much more customized to the needs of the customer, not the needs of the insurance company, with better rates, with great digital experience, without worrying too much. Bottom line, the change that we brought to the world is making drone operations something simple. We just wanted to be something that you can do without too many worries, just to fly with peace of mind. So that's it. I mean, we're about flying drones, not about anything else. We're just here to help you do what you love without worrying too much.
Well, I love what you just said there, Elad. You said the change that we brought to the world. And that's exactly why we have you on this podcast during Thought Leadership Month. So thank you for bringing that change. Thank you for educating people about the importance of this, for helping people grow their businesses, and reducing the risk in doing that. Because, we talk about public perception all the time, and the less accidents and the more good news stories we have out there, the more this industry will thrive. And you are a big part of that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Really appreciate you. Had a blast on Clubhouse. Had so much fun today. So thanks for joining us. And thanks everybody out there. Real quick before we close, tomorrow join us on Clubhouse with Volatus Aerospace. So Glenn Lynch, the CEO, is going to join us. For those, again, that have been following this podcast, you probably realize Volatus has endowed the Above and Beyond series all year long on this podcast. And so we're going to talk with Glenn and some of the thought leadership that went behind that endowment. And of course, his new storyteller, Danielle Gagne, who came from Commercial UAV News. And so we'll be talking to Glenn tomorrow. Join us 11 a.m. Mountain Time on Clubhouse Drone Law Connections. And then Glenn will join us live at AUVSI Exponential from the floor next Wednesday for this podcast, same time. Same place for you, but different location for us. So thanks again. Thank you so much, Elad. Thank you, everybody out there, out here. And of course, perfect with this theme, fly safe.